By the time I walked into our apartment that Thursday evening, my husband had already decided what kind of day I'd had. I knew it before he said anything. It was in the way the place looked. The counters wiped down. The mail stacked in a straight line by the fruit bowl. My shoes from that morning nudged neatly against the wall instead of where I had kicked them off by the door. Gavin liked order in the same way some people liked music in the background. He needed it so constantly that after a while you stopped hearing it and just lived inside the rhythm. He was at the kitchen counter in his shirt sleeves slicing chicken for a salad we had not discussed because meals were one of those things he preferred to just handle. The overhead light caught the edge of the knife and the clean line of his wedding band. He looked up once, took in my face and said, "Long day." It should have sounded kind. It almost did. "Busy," I said, setting my purse on the chair. He glanced at the grocery bag in my hand. "You bought the expensive coffee again." I looked down at the bag like it had betrayed me on the walk upstairs. It was on sale. "It's still more than the one we usually get." His voice stayed light, almost amused. "You have to look at the unit price, Lena, not the sticker." That was another thing. Lena. He only called me that when he was being patient with me. I stood there with my coat still on, suddenly aware of how tired my shoulders were. The apartment smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and grilled chicken, and the hand soap Gavin always bought in bulk because it was more efficient. Nothing in the room was wrong. That was part of the problem. Nothing was ever wrong enough to name cleanly. "I can return it tomorrow," I said. He gave me a quick look, then the kind that made me feel 12. "I'm not scolding you. I'm just saying we should be smarter." Gavin loved that word most when the decision had already been made. I unpacked the rest of the groceries while he finished dinner. The yogurt I liked had disappeared from the fridge last month because he said buying separate brands was wasteful. Our streaming password had changed at some point, and I still did not know the new one because he kept everything saved on the TV anyway. I had meant to ask him 3 different times for the login to the electric account so I could help pay bills directly, but every time I brought it up, he said I've got it, in that calm voice of his that made pushing further feel petty. At dinner, he asked about the clinic. I told him one of our older patients had finally made it up the stairs without stopping and how proud he looked when everybody clapped. Before I finished the story, Gavin smiled and said, "You're so good at that front desk cheerleading thing." I smiled back automatically. It took me a second to understand why the comment stung. "It's more than that," I said. "I do scheduling, intake insurance calls, I know." He cut his chicken and looked at me with patient affection. "I'm complimenting you." I nodded. Then I ate the rest of my dinner in the careful silence that had become one of my best skills. The next afternoon, Mara asked if I wanted to grab coffee before heading home. She worked 2 doors down from me at the clinic handling billing and referrals and had the kind of face that made dishonesty feel clumsy. She noticed things, not in a nosy way, in a way that made me feel sometimes a little overexposed. We ended up at a coffee shop near the river because it was halfway between work and my apartment. I was telling her about Sunday dinner at Gavin's sister's place before I realized I'd stopped stirring my drink. What she said? Nothing. Elena. I looked out the window. People were walking past in jackets, shoulders hunched against the March wind. Columbus was still gray in that tired end of winter way, like the whole city needed sleep. "It was just awkward," I said. Gavin corrected me about the condo. Mara waited. I hated how easy it would have been to make it sound small and how true that would have been on paper. Gavin's sister Diane had asked whether we were still thinking about buying instead of renting. I said maybe someday if the market cooled off. Gavin laughed softly and put his hand on the back of my chair. "What Elena means," he said, "is that she likes to look at listings when she's stressed. We're not in a position to buy anything unless I'm the only one making those decisions." Diane had looked down at her plate after that. Not shocked, just polite. I laughed too because that was easier than sitting there with the sentence between us. Now Mara was still waiting. "He was joking," I said. "Was he?" I took a sip of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. "Mostly." Mara leaned back. "Can I ask you something without you getting defensive?" "That depends. Could you leave for a week if you wanted to?" I blinked at her. "What? Just a week? Not forever. Could you pack a bag? Get yourself somewhere else and handle your life without asking?" Gavin, how I laughed, but nothing in me found it funny. "That's dramatic." "Is it?" I opened my mouth and shut it again. Could I? I had my own debit card, but Gavin moved money between accounts so often that I was never fully sure what was where. The car was in both our names. I thought, though, I had not seen the paperwork in over a year. I did not know the password to our internet provider. I did not know what we had in savings. I knew where we kept the batteries, the cold medicine, the extra towels, and the checkbook we never used. I knew how Gavin took his coffee and which shirts could not go in the dryer. I knew how to make a life run smoothly around him. That was not the same as knowing how to run one without him. Mara's face softened when she saw something change in mine. I'm not trying to turn you against your husband, she said. I just think you've started talking like he's your manager. I looked down at my cup. He just handles the practical stuff better. That isn't the same thing as you being incapable. I wanted to argue. Instead, I heard myself say very quietly, I don't think I know where half our money is. Mara did not react with big sister pity or outrage. She just looked sad. That somehow hurt worse. When I got home that night, Gavin was on the couch with his laptop open and his reading glasses low on his nose. He looked up when I came in, smiled and said, You're late. Mara and I got coffee. He nodded once. You could have texted. I know. That should have been the end of it. Maybe in a healthier marriage it would have been. But something in me was still raw from the coffee shop, from hearing my own life described out loud in words I had spent years avoiding. I took off my coat, hung it up, and stood there by the door with my hands empty. Gavin, I said, and my voice sounded thinner than I wanted it to. I think I need some space. He was very still, not startled, not hurt-looking, just still. I felt my heart beat everywhere at once. I don't mean forever, I said quickly. I just think maybe I need a few days to think, or maybe I want to talk to someone, a lawyer maybe, just to understand things. Gavin closed the laptop carefully and set it on the coffee table. Then he took off his glasses and folded them. Every movement was neat, unrushed. Elena, he said, you're overwhelmed. The softness in his voice made my skin go cold. I'm serious. I know you think you are. He stood up and crossed the room slowly, like you would approach somebody skittish. But you haven't thought this through. I have. No. He smiled, not cruelly, which almost made it worse. You've had a hard week. Mara's put ideas in your head and now you're spiraling because you don't like feeling dependent. My throat tightened. That's not what this is. He stopped a few feet in front of me. Then what is it? I opened my mouth and realized I did not know how to say it cleanly. Not without sounding dramatic. Not without sounding ungrateful. He had never hit me, never cheated, never thrown a plate or punched a wall. He had just somehow become the person standing between me and my own certainty. I don't feel like myself anymore, I said. Something flickered in his face then. Not pain. Recognition. He had been here before, I thought suddenly. Not in this exact conversation, maybe. But near enough to it that the road felt familiar. He exhaled through his nose and shook his head a little, like I was breaking his heart by being foolish. You'd never survive without me, he said. The room went so quiet I heard the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He kept talking, calmly, practically, about rent and utilities and insurance and how stressed I got whenever anything financial changed. About how I forgot deadlines and hated confrontation and still asked him what to do when my tires needed air. He said it all in the tone of a man laying out weather conditions. Nothing emotional, nothing ugly, just facts offered with care. That was the part that made me feel sick. Because the worst part was not what he said. The worst part was how quickly some terrified corner of me answered, he might be right. I do not remember what I said after that, only that I ended up in the bathroom with the door locked, sitting on the closed toilet seat with my phone in both hands, staring at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror like I had found a stranger living behind my face. He did not knock. He did not apologize. After a few minutes, he texted from the living room. Let's discuss this tomorrow when you're calmer. I looked at the message until the words blurred, then I opened my search bar, typed divorce attorney, Columbus, Ohio, and let my thumb hover over the screen. My hand was shaking hard enough that I almost dropped the phone. The woman who answered the next morning had a clear professional voice and told me Andrea Bell had an opening at 11:30. By the time I stepped into the office building the following day, I still felt embarrassed enough to turn around. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and old paper. My own reflection moved beside me in the glass doors, small and tense and carrying a purse like I was borrowing adulthood from somebody else. At the reception desk, a woman asked my name, smiled politely, and handed me a clipboard. I sat down and stared at the top line of the intake form. For a second, I could not remember our checking account number. Then I realized I had never known it. For a second, I could not remember our checking account number. Then I realized I had never known it. The realization sat there on the intake form in black ink and a blank line simple enough to fit in a box. Account information, monthly expenses, current savings, shared assets. It was all ordinary adult paperwork, the kind people filled out every day without feeling their stomach drop through the floor. I put the clipboard on my lap and stared at the carpet until the receptionist called my name. Andrea Bell's office was warmer than the lobby, with a floor lamp in one corner and shelves full of books that looked expensive and patient. She stood when I came in, shook my hand, and motioned for me to sit across from her desk. She was maybe in her early 40s, neat dark blazer, no softness wasted anywhere, but not cold either. The kind of woman who looked like she had spent years being careful with facts because other people's emotions kept trying to fog them up. "Tell me what brought you in," she said. I had rehearsed something in the elevator. I lost it the second she asked. "I think my husband has been controlling," I said, then immediately hated how vague that sounded. Not in a dramatic way. He just handles everything. And I think I let that happen for so long that now I don't know what belongs to me and what I'm allowed to ask. Andrea nodded once, not encouraging, not skeptical, just listening. She asked practical questions first. How long had we been married, whether we rented or owned, whose names were on the lease, whether there were joint checking and savings accounts, credit cards, retirement funds, car title, health insurance, tax returns. At first, I answered the way I always had, with approximations. I think both our names are on the car. I'm pretty sure the savings account is joint. He handles the utilities. He keeps the tax files. After a while, the word think started to sound humiliating in my own mouth. Andrea never made a face. That almost made it worse. She just kept going in the same calm tone, and each question exposed another blank spot in my life. "Do you know the balance of your main checking account number? Do you know where your paychecks are deposited?" "Yes, joint account." "I mean, I assume it's still the same one." "You assume Gavin set up direct deposit years ago. I've never changed it." "Do you have independent access to the account online?" I opened my mouth and sat there for a second. "Not exactly." She folded her hands. "Elena, has your husband ever prevented you from seeing financial information when you asked?" The truthful answer should have been no. He had never said absolutely, not you may not look. But the more accurate answer lived in the space around the question. "He says he'll send it," I said. "Or that he'll show me later, or that he already paid whatever needs paying so I don't need to stress." And then it somehow becomes rude to keep asking. Andrea wrote something down. My face was hot by then. I hated that I sounded incompetent to a stranger. I hated even more that I sounded incompetent because I was. Except that thought did not land the same way anymore. In her office, under her flat, practical questions, something was starting to tilt. Maybe I was unprepared. Maybe I had let too much slide. But it also felt suddenly like I had been living inside a house where every door opened inward except mine. Andrea asked whether Gavin knew I was there. I told her yes, or half yes. He knew I wanted to talk to someone. He probably assumed that was the same thing as deciding nothing. She asked me if there had been threats. I almost said no. Then I heard his voice again, calm as weather. "You'd never survive without me." "I don't know if it counts as a threat," I said. It didn't sound like one at the time. It sounded like an opinion, a very confident one. "That distinction matters less than people think," Andrea said. She turned toward a stack of folders on the side of her desk and pulled one free. My name was on the tab. Or, I thought it was. I was still watching her hands, the clean movement of them, when she opened it and stopped. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Long enough. Her eyes moved down the page, then back to the tab, then across to something clipped inside the file. Her whole posture changed, not dramatically, just enough that the room seemed to narrow around it. What I said. She closed the folder halfway. "One moment. What is that? I need to check something." But she had already gone still, in exactly the way people do when they have seen something they were not meant to show you. The top sheet had shifted when she moved it. My name was there. Elena Mercer. Underneath it, in a block of typed text, I caught phrases before she could turn it. Limited independent financial capacity. Emotionally suggestible under pressure. Likely to accept early settlement if framed as stability. I stared at the page without breathing. Andrea shut the folder fully then and set it flat on the desk. "That is not your intake file," she said. I heard myself laugh once. Not because anything was funny, because my body had run out of normal reactions. "What is it?" Her mouth tightened. "I cannot discuss documents that were opened in error. Did Gavin write that?" She did not answer. "Did he say that about me, Elena?" Her voice stayed calm. "I need you to listen to me carefully. That file should not have been in this room, and it should not have been opened in front of you. I am going to correct that. But I also need you to understand that what you just saw is serious. Serious." The word should have felt legal. It felt intimate. My hands were cold. I looked at the folder as if it might move on its own. There was more. Andrea did not deny it. I saw my name. Yes. I swallowed. I saw something about a settlement. She exhaled slowly. I need to handle the procedural issue first. That was the lawyer in her, I understood, but there was something else underneath it. Not pity. Not alarm, exactly. Something quieter and worse. The seriousness she had named. A knock sounded at the door. Andrea stood, opened it a few inches, and spoke to someone in a voice too low for me to hear. When she came back, the wrong folder was gone. The right one looked thinner. For the rest of the meeting, she stayed precise. She explained what documents I needed to gather, pay stubs, tax forms, if I could access them, lease documents, any bank statements in my email. She told me to stop using shared devices for private searches. She told me to change passwords on anything personal. She told me not to announce my next steps before I had them. She never brought the file up again. She did not need to. By the time I walked out of her office, the whole marriage had begun rearranging itself in my mind. Not all at once. More like furniture being dragged across a floor in another room. The promotion at the clinic I never applied for because Gavin said the extra hours would burn me out and the raise was too small to justify the stress. The credit card he told me we should close because one was simpler. The way he used to answer casual questions for me at parties before I had opened my mouth, smiling like he knew me best. The afternoon I asked him to show me how he handled our monthly budget and he kissed my forehead and said, "Why would I want you miserable with me?" I sat in my car in the parking garage and put both hands over my face. The worst realization was not that he had secrets. It was that he had descriptions. A version of me written down somewhere in language smooth enough for professionals. Not wife. Not partner. Asset risk. Limited capacity. Suggestible. I thought about the way he had looked at me across the living room when I said I needed space. Not shocked. Not scrambling. Ready. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a text from Gavin. "I know you're upset. Come home and let's reset. We can make a plan that actually protects you." For the first time, I could hear the sentence without stepping inside it. Not protects us, protects you, like I was a problem to be managed. Like he was already talking to the version of me in that file. I called Mara instead. She answered on the second ring, and the second she heard my voice, she said, "What happened?" I told her enough that she went quiet. "Come here," she said, "not home, here." I drove to her apartment in a daze and sat at her kitchen table while she made tea. I did not drink. She did not crowd me. She let me say things twice when I needed to. Later that evening, after the room had gone dim around us, my phone rang again. Diane Mercer. I stared at the screen before answering. "Elena," she said, and her voice was careful in a way it had never needed to be before. "Gavin called our mother. He said you were spiraling and being influenced." Something inside me went very still. Diane went on after a pause. "I'm not calling to defend him. I did not speak. He's always needed to be the smartest person in the room," she said quietly. "And when somebody challenges that, he gets colder than people notice right away." I closed my eyes. "There was a girlfriend before you," she said. "A long time ago. He used to tell everyone she was too emotional to make decisions on her own. By the end, she believed him." I opened my eyes and looked down at Mara's table at the ring of water under my untouched mug. That was the moment part 3 became inevitable. Not when I saw the file. When I understood I was not the first woman he had tried to shrink into agreeing with him. That night I slept on Mara's couch with my phone face down on the floor and my shoes lined up beside the coffee table like I was staying in somebody else's life by accident. In the morning, I woke to a message from Andrea Bell telling me not to return to the apartment alone until we had spoken. There was another from Gavin sent just after midnight. "I'm willing to be patient if you stop letting other people make this worse." I read it twice, then set the phone down and looked at the pale rectangle of winter light coming through Mara's blinds. Even then, even after the file, even after Diane, there was a part of me that could still feel the old pull in his tone. Not love, not exactly. Gravity. The habit of believing he understood reality better than I did. That was the thing I had to break before anything else. Andrea got me in that afternoon. She did not waste words. She told me the file I had seen had come through opposing counsel's preliminary materials by mistake mixed into an intake transfer that never should have crossed desks. She could not hand me a copy. She could not recite it back to me line by line, but she could tell me in the careful language of someone walking right up to an ethical boundary and stopping there that I needed to proceed as if my husband had been planning a narrative strategy for some time. Narrative strategy, I repeated. Yes, it sounded clinical. It made my skin crawl anyway. She slid a legal pad toward me. "What matters now is what you do next. He may assume you are too overwhelmed to act quickly. Use that." I stared at the yellow paper. "I don't know how." Andrea held my gaze. "You do not need to know how to do everything. You need to do the next correct thing. So I did. I opened a checking account in my own name with the small stack of documents Mara helped me gather from my work portal and old emails. I requested new direct deposit forms from the clinic. I called our apartment office and asked in a voice that shook only a little what I needed if I did not intend to renew a lease jointly. I paid for a consultation retainer from money I had in a savings bond my grandmother had given me at 18 and I had never touched because Gavin once called it symbolic, not useful. By the end of the day, useful had a different definition. Gavin kept texting. The messages were almost tender if you did not read them closely. I hate seeing you like this. You are making permanent decisions from temporary emotions. If your lawyer is filling your head with worst-case scenarios, that's exactly why people like her profit. That last one almost made me laugh, not because it was funny, because it was so nakedly him, calm, superior, so certain that the right framing could still pull me back inside. Andrea advised that if I was going to meet him, I should do it somewhere controlled with a purpose. Not at the apartment, not in a place where routine could do half his work for him. So 2 days later, I sat across from my husband in a private room at Andrea's office with a paper cup of water in front of me and my hands folded so tightly in my lap that my fingers ached. Gavin came in wearing the grey coat I bought him our second Christmas together. He looked composed, handsome, faintly tired in the way people find sympathetic in men. He set his gloves on the table, looked at me first and Andrea second, and gave a small sad smile. "Elena," he said, "you didn't have to do this like an ambush." Andrea said nothing. She was there as my counsel, not my shield. I understood the difference now. Gavin sat down. "I'm not your enemy." There was a time that sentence would have wrecked me. I looked at him and noticed with an almost detached clarity that he still expected my face to help him, still expected me to rush in and soften things for both of us. "You told your family I was spiraling," I said. He exhaled as if already disappointed in the direction. "Because you are. You ran to a coworker, hired an attorney before we even had a real conversation, and now you're sitting here acting like I've done something criminal." There it was, acting like. The suggestion that reality was still mostly a matter of tone. "You were preparing for this before I ever mentioned leaving," I said. His expression barely changed. Preparing for what? For me. A pause, small, but real. Then he leaned back and clasped his hands. "Elena, every responsible adult prepares for instability. That doesn't mean what you think it means." I felt the old fear rise in me, fast and physical, the old instinct to retreat before I sounded foolish. But Andrea had been right. I did not need to win everything. I needed the next correct thing. "I saw the file," I said. That landed, not loudly. He did not flinch or curse or slam his hand on the table, but something in his face tightened at the edges, as if a door somewhere inside him had closed. Andrea spoke then very evenly. "We are not here to discuss internal document handling. We are here to discuss terms." Gavin did not look at her. He kept his eyes on me. "You don't understand what you saw," he said. "Then explain it." His jaw shifted once. "What you saw was caution." I waited. "You're emotional under stress," he said. "You avoid practical decisions until they become emergencies. You rely on other people's judgment. Those are facts, Elena. Unpleasant facts, maybe, but facts." The room went very quiet. There it was at last. Not the mask fully off, but thinner than he had ever let me see it. Not love speaking harshly. Management speaking plainly. "You wrote me down like a problem," I said. "No," he said, and for the first time there was a flicker of irritation in his voice. "I responded to the reality you created." That sentence did more than any confession could have done, because suddenly the whole shape of him came clear. He did not think he had betrayed me. He thought he had assessed me, organized me, positioned me correctly inside a structure where he remained the necessary one. Diane's voice came back to me from the night before. "He has always needed to be the smartest person in the room." "I didn't create that reality alone," I said. "You built it with me. Every time you said I didn't need to know something because you'd handle it. Every time you answered for me before I could speak. Every time you called my job small, or my questions stress, or my independence a risk." Gavin's face went still in a way I recognized. Not surprise. "Calculation under pressure. You are rewriting the marriage," he said. "No," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm reading it." Andrea slid a document across the table then. Preliminary terms. Cleaner than what Gavin had expected, and less vulnerable than what he had planned for. Temporary separation of finances. Direct access requests. Disclosure deadlines. No casual verbal arrangement that could be simplified later in his favor. He glanced down at it and let out a quiet breath through his nose. "This is not practical for you," he said to me. "You cannot afford to prove a point." It was such a perfect sentence I almost admired it. Not cruel, not shouting, just a man trying one last time to make my dignity sound irresponsible. My palms were damp. My heart was pounding hard enough to make my vision feel thin at the edges. I thought about the apartment, the passwords I did not know, the bills I had never paid directly, the stupid, humiliating number of things that still scared me. Then I thought about that file, emotionally suggestible under pressure, likely to accept early settlement if framed as stability. I picked up the pen. The sound it made against the paper was small. That was all. No dramatic music, no gas from the room. Just my own name in blue ink written a little more carefully than usual because my hand was shaking. But it was mine. When I looked up, Gavin was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger, irrelevance. Not his mind no longer. I moved into a studio apartment 3 weeks later on the north side of the city above a florist that closed at 6 and left the whole stairwell smelling faintly like damp stems and sweet rot. The place had one narrow closet, bad kitchen lighting, and radiators that knocked at night like somebody thinking better of a decision and then refusing to knock again. It was not pretty. It was not the life I had pictured when I got married at 23 in a dress my mother cried over. But the lease had only my name on it. The first evening there, I sat on the floor with an Allen wrench and a flat-packed side table from Target and put it together by myself. It took too long. I had to redo one leg because I attached it backward. I swore once under my breath and laughed afterward because no one corrected the way I did it. No one stepped in. No one told me I was making it harder than it had to be. Outside, I could hear traffic on the main road and somebody downstairs dragging a metal bucket across tile. My phone lit up once with a bank notification from my new account. My paycheck had landed where I told it to go. I just sat there looking at the screen. The room was quiet in a way I was not used to. Not empty. Not lonely exactly. Just unmonitored. My mistakes belonged to me now. So did the fixes. I thought for a moment that I should feel triumphant. Instead, I felt something gentler and sadder. Like a bruise finally revealing its full shape after the pressure is gone. Gavin had been wrong. Not about everything. I was scared. I was behind. I had things to learn that most adults had learned years earlier, but scared was not the same as incapable. That had been the lie. I got up, carried the side table to the corner beside the bed, and set my keys on top of it. Then I turned off the overhead light and stood by the window for a minute, looking down at the florist sign glowing faint pink over the sidewalk. For the first time in years, there was no one in the room arranging my limits into something that sounded like love.